My opponent is correct that physician-assisted suicide has been legalized in 3 states. There are guidelines set up as to what person can receive such measures, including that the person must be mentally competent. In my opening statement, I addressed this issue, stating that many who are terminally ill are in fact suffering from a treatable mental disorder. If the doctor is not aware of this disorder and grants the patient death, is this not going against this guideline? Was the patient not in fact mentally competent? Another guideline set up is that the patient must have a prognosis of 6 months or less to live. But how many times is the person given a set amount of time to live, only to go on living for months or sometimes even years? How many times do we hear of these miracle stories where someone is expected to die only to have a miraculous recovery? Now, these don't happen very often, but they do happen. What if these patients were allowed to be euthanized or given physician-assisted suicide? They would not be here on this earth today. My opponent states that euthanasia is a person's right protected by the Due Process Clause. However, we see that the Supreme Court has consistently held, as was seen in Vaco v. Quill and Washington v. Glucksberg, that the Constitution does not grant an individual the right to die. My opponent says that it is the right of the terminally ill to bring an early end to persistent pain and suffering. I do not refute that the terminally ill deserve to live out the rest of their lives pain-free. However, I do believe that pain is instead symptomatic of improper medical care given to these patients. According to research performed by the New York State Task Force on Life and Law, many requests by the terminally ill to end their lives are correlated with depression or unmanaged pain. It is the duty of the medical professionals treating the terminally ill to effectively treat such pain and suffering. However, this is not always the case. Many studies, in fact, point out the ineffective means by which medical professionals are treating the terminally ill. According to the task force, studies report that over 50% of cancer patients do not receive adequate pain relief. Is it not a bit backwards, then, to change a law so that people can end their lives instead of addressing the issue of improper medical care? Let's instead address the root causes here, as addressed by the task force, including a, quote, lack of professional knowledge and training, unjustified fears about physical and psychological dependence, poor pain assessment, pharmacy practices, and the reluctance of patients and their families to seek pain relief. Unquote. As was addressed in Connolly's article on pain management as an alternative to euthanasia, quote, the obligation rests with the society, the family, and those healthcare professionals who care enough to provide available pain management techniques. If we fail to meet this challenge, the clamor for euthanasia will continue. Unquote. So let's participate in another means of mindfulness here, where we put ourselves in the shoes of someone who is not receiving what is rightfully due to them, a pain-free death.